Live. So welcome to another Workflow Wednesday on Now with Troy. And today I'm super excited. I get to pull in three people that have been involved with Thirdera, one of our partners, and two other people from Thirdera. So let me unpin my video and you'll get to see more of them. With me are the presenters from our webinar that we held last Thursday. I've got Bree from Thirdera Digital. Hi, Bree.
Hi, Troy.
I've got Jon Reynolds, who leads our strategic alliances, finding us key partners. Hi, Jon.
Hey, Troy. How's it going?
Going well. And one of those partners is G. G, I'm not even going to attempt to say your name, but I thank you for joining us. So G, say hello.
How's it going, guys?
If you guys would do a quick intro. Again, the whole point of this is to just kind of unpack some of the things you wish you could have got to on that webinar. Because we were talking about how to balance innovation and practicality as it relates to experience, as it relates to calling up people on the phone versus self-serve. There's so many things to talk about, but I want to kind of open the mic to you. If you give just a short intro for each of you, so people that are jumping into this. While you're doing that, I'll jump onto the chat and say where people can go to get that on demand of that webinar if they missed it.
Perfect. Why don't I go first? My name is Breanne Creelman. I'm the Director of UX UI at Thirdera Digital. Here we are a collective of experienced architects, developers, and UX UI designers and design technologists, and we're super passionate about increasing productivity through exceptional ServiceNow experiences. Jon, do you want to go next?
I will happily go next. Yeah, this is Jon Reynolds. I don't have quite the glorious introduction, but I do lead, as Troy opened up with, I lead our alliances and channels ecosystem work here at Thirdera, along with our corporate development strategies. G, over to you.
Yeah, last but not least, right, as the saying goes. So my name is Guillaume, G for short. I run the channels and alliances here at 3C Logic. We are a cloud voice and SMS platform. And one of the things that we do very well is weave those capabilities into the ServiceNow work stream so that you can, in fact, create a full and comprehensive omni-channel experience, not just for agents, but everything administrative as well. So you can create interactive, personalized call flows. Troy, you mentioned self-service, so voice self-service as well as live agent, all the way through to analytics and fancy things like sentiment scoring and speech analytics so that you can understand the quality of the engagements between you and your end customers.
Very cool. For those of you that are tuning in, you think of just the breadth and depth that we have in just these three speakers. One of the things they talked about on the webinar, and I hope you catch it, I posted in the chat the link that you can register, but one of the things that you guys unpacked is this concept of innovation and where to focus innovation, the 70-20-10 rule. And so if you guys just want to revisit that shortly and talk about how that helps shape where we should be focusing our innovation efforts.
Yeah, maybe I'll open it up and then let G and Bree respond there. But I think what I found fascinating is just how companies that we see as very innovative, very progressive, forward-looking companies, and how they are themselves having to strike that balance, right? Between, that 70% of the time focused on, what we termed Horizon 1 in the webinar, but really the near term, the practical, the space that we would often consider kind of ripe for continual improvement for, for immediate modernization. I think what those companies find, like, companies like Google that really pioneered in this space, is that those are lower cost, more immediately adoptable types of enhancements that we can bring about in innovation. But you can't focus all of your time in that space. If you do, as we called out in the webinar, you become the Xeroxes of the world. You miss that that opportunity that became digital in the photography space. And so how do you balance that 70 offset with the next generation, those immediate of evolution of technologies and markets to that 10%, which really are those brand new markets, brand new technologies. And I think what was interesting to me as we were kind of exploring how to approach this conversation is looking at two different spaces. And, whether we're looking in Bree's case in the sense of digital, I think an area that we see is really pioneering. And what Bree would argue is that actually a lot of the improvements, a lot of the modernization are actually kind of almost at a micro level, a lot in that 70% space. It's those little tunes that can really make a significant impact in terms of experience and adoption. And yet, in G's case, this technology that's been out there for years and years and years, we're actually seeing quite a bit of modernization. G's really, they're doing, yes, absolutely. The routine is there, but he's also really pushing that envelope and that horizon to that 20% space as well as he kind of opened up with. So I thought it was a good counterfoil for, on what we may be, the classic perception and belief may be versus what's actually happening on the ground when you go and lift up the covers. So.
Bree, I'm going to let you go.
I was waiting for you to go, G. I was trying to be polite.
I saw the stare happening.
No, I'd have to echo definitely what Jon said around some of that 70%, because I think sometimes when different things and designs are implemented, they might have been a little bit rushed. So some of those 70% things might not have been as fine-tuned as they needed to be. So just going back, reevaluating is what is there working correctly and in the way that you intended, and then are the users using it in the way that you thought they would? So just gathering more learnings around that 70%. But I also think it's really important when you're adjusting that 70% to always keep your eye on the bigger picture. So eventually, if we phase into that 20-10%, what does that look like, so that we're not going to change something every 6 months or change something every year? How can we make sure that we're always thinking about that 10% while we're making changes in the 20 and 70?
Yeah, and what I would add, which we didn't really cover, and despite the fact that we chatted for an hour and could have kept going, is, when you look at platforms right now, you look at a platform like ServiceNow, you look at contact center solutions, what they're trying to do is actually shrink the delta between that 70% category and the 10%, right? This whole idea of low code, no code, the entire intent behind this digital transformation that everyone has been hearing over the last few years is how can you basically enable your everyday average operations manager, service desk manager, whatever the case may be, or even the CIO who's looking at the entire platform stack. How can you make it easier to adopt maybe some of that technology that would fall in the 20 or 10% category and bring it down so it can be applied sooner and a faster means within practical day-to-day applications, right? So there is a desire and a momentum to try and make it so that the bleeding edge can be adopted sooner. But at the same time, we also have to recognize that from a practical standpoint, large organizations, one of the things that hinders them from being able to move quickly is the fact that they've invested in, perhaps at the time, what was bleeding edge technology, and getting off or migrating from or modernizing those systems is sometimes the challenge. And if you become overly obsessed with the end point, you fail to realize that there's perhaps very basic things that you can do today that can either stretch the shelf life of those platforms, or you might realize that what was a 1-year implementation process can now be done in 6 weeks, and you can still drive meaningful value without necessarily having to use those bleeding edge technologies to get you there, right? So I think that's something we kind of missed on in our discussion. But that 70-20-10 rule, it makes a ton of sense. You just got to find out where you are in your life cycle, and it may be case specific. It may not be company. You may not be able to look at the company through that lens.
Right. There's two thoughts that came out of that as you guys talked about that. One is your 70% might not be my 70%.
Yep.
Right. That if you go to different parts of the organization, there's focus of what's the business criticality for me, and it just in our microcosm, right? From a delivery standpoint, we've got nearly 400 projects running. The 70% of making sure the systems are in place to innovate and drive that well is important. As a client executive, I'm really interested in what are the processes that help me reach out to find new prospects, to serve my clients and help in that process of really helping them engage. So my 70% is going to be different than someone in delivery. And you touched on it a little bit of being able to jump in and say, especially as you get into low code, no code, being able to innovate on my 70% matters tremendously.
Well, I mean, people are trying to find a platform, right, Troy, that fits everything. But
Yeah.
what they realize is it needs to be, a platform does certainly simplify things, but it needs to have the ability to be decentralized enough so it can cater to individual departments, right? I mean, I know in our case, we focus in really in that interaction layer. And sometimes their pain point is that they're held hostage to technologies that cannot meet their more, maybe advanced use cases, right? Because the technology was bought for the organization and doesn't necessarily address the needs of some of the, perhaps smaller entities, but that doesn't mean they're any less important, right? I mean, your customer support team, that's the face of the organization. So that's one of the things that people struggle with. And that's where the 70-20-10 rule, you're right. You need to look at your technology stack to understand what degree of flexibility does it grant your teams within that 70-20-10 lens. I don't know, John or Bree, what your thoughts are.
Yeah, I think there's, the model really, I think it does allow for that specificity that, that you're inquiring about there, Troy. And I think, what G sees and in that, if you look at the two axes on the chart that we put up, you're focusing, one axis is really certainly the technology axis. And that technology is those things, those are the things that are immediately impacting you. Those are the things that either you're leveraging in the course of your services delivery, or certainly things that you may be providing outward to your client. Second is the market, right? And the markets that you're serving. And so, are we pushing, one way? Are we modernizing technologies? Are we opening up or just expanding markets? If you look at, I think even as I was going through the ideation of, okay, well, what are some representative examples of those things that are out there that were bleeding edge, tip of the spear, brand new technologies? I think one of the more recent ones in my case was the tablet, right? When we introduced tablets as a brand new piece of technology we'd never seen or touched or interacted with, right? So, but what you find is a lot of those things that we see is really kind of innovative, very pioneering, are actually, probably more those 20%ers where we just, we took a basic bag phone and we turned it into a flip phone that then became a smartphone, right? This progressive, that's really more in that 20% where we're opening up new industry, but they're tangential to where we were, right? So, the model certainly is intended to be applicable to, where you sit in the world. Now, is that relative to just your world, or in a lot of cases, I think when we think about services delivery, is that, that's an extension of you plus some of those other silos in the organization. So you do have to kind of think broadly in that sense. But from a practicality perspective, bring that down to your world and how we manage the sawtooth, so to speak, of that that segment of the workflow that you're directly touching.
Yeah, right.
And I think with what you were saying there, practicality doesn't have to be boring. It can still be innovative. And when you think like, sometimes you have a stakeholder that's like, we have to get everyone on a tablet. A user experience tactic that we use is we'll ask them why 5 times. And if they can tell us specifically why 5 times, then we'll start to kind of flush out that problem statement. But sometimes they've heard of another industry that switched everything to tablets and they want to be synchronized with that because they believe in that change. But if you really get down to it, like another example we have on lots of clients is we don't want the phone to ring anymore. We don't want our help desk to be answering the phone. So you say, well, why? And then you understand, no, we just want to take down some of the call volume and educate our people as to where to find the knowledge articles to get the information that they need. But eliminating something completely because you're trying to be innovative is not always the answer.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think that segues into another question that I had kind of coming out of the webinar. And I think as we talked a little bit preparing for this session, we talked about a little bit too, is call centers and cost centers used to be very synonymous. It's like cost of calls was very, very prominent. And I think, with all of the digitization that we've had, the fact that we aren't in a conference room to have this discussion with one camera, right? That the world has changed. Let's talk a little bit about how you guys are seeing that transformation where call centers are moving from a cost center to, dare I say, a revenue center or a revenue retention center, where it's really the value as we're reaching it's our touch point with our customers or clients.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'll tackle that one real quick. So, I mean, look, we have to at least accept that the market itself has fundamentally changed, right? We talked about last week that a lot of things now, if they're not already, are moving towards a subscription-based concept, right? You might even argue, grocery stores now are, or at least Amazon is attempting to make them self-service, right? And things of that nature. So, and obviously the last few years have certainly hurt the retail space. Now, all of a sudden people have been accustomed to saying, I can just order everything that comes to my doorstep, right? So why leave my house unless there's an experience involved into it? But what has also resulted is that, it's limited the number of touch points that you can have with your customers that can create meaningful, memorable events. And if customers are now only as loyal as, their subscription contract with you, right? Then you have, all of a sudden, those engagements are crucial, right?
Right.
So yes, in the past, everything was measured on the basis of what's the cost of that call, and could self-service address the same need and mitigate my cost? And that is still a viable use case, and there's some ROI there even today. That being said, what you're going to find is a lot of digital interactions still result in the need for an individual, a live individual, and sometimes that results in a call or a live chat. It doesn't really matter, and it could be because the self-service tool was exceeded its capabilities. It could be that the person just got frustrated because they didn't know how to use the tool. We're finding that it's not all generation based. It's across generations. I'm a little biased here, but I personally don't think that voice as a channel is the problem, right? We all have bad experiences. We don't want to call organizations. Is that because the channel is fundamentally flawed, or because it's never been properly applied, right? And I'm of the opinion that it's never been properly applied, or certainly hasn't modernized with the times, using your smartphone analogy, John, right? So
how many of us have been there on the call? Human, operator, person.
Exactly, right? So, and you go through that customer experience and you land on someone, just have them ask you the exact same questions. That's a lack of integration between platforms and integration in the background. People don't want to know what's going on in the background and what it takes to get you to the right person. They just want you to get them to the right person. And personally, I never find it more frustrating than when someone tries to hide my option to reach you, right? To me, that's not customer service, even though you're trying to encourage me to use all your other assets, right?
Right.
To me, that is your desire to avoid a cost. And what you don't realize is it may cost you my relationship with you as a customer. And so that's why I don't think they're cost centers anymore. Maybe you call them retention centers, right? Maybe that's where it's going. But it costs more to acquire net new than it does to keep people.
Yep. Agreed. Bree or John?
I think it's what's interesting about what G's saying, I think too, is, and it attacks to this notion that we've, that's been out here, I think particularly in the service desk space, of this shift left methodology. And I think what we're seeing is maybe this assumption that was a linear progression. That, if we just continue to stand this up, they will come, right? And they will continue to adopt, and they will adopt this stuff linearly. And I think if anything in the last couple of years, hopefully what we've learned is that humans are not necessarily linear, and the environments around us, the situations that we put in, the limitations on our social interactions, that maybe in fact that we're a little bit more of a sine curve there in terms of our wants and needs. And there are times when my patience level is such, and I'm perfectly willing to go through the automated menus and get to where I need to go and feel confident that's going to get there. And there are times whether it's just the time that I have available, or just my mental state when I'm making that call, that I know that just getting to that human that has a pleasant voice, that's going to, I'm actually going to exit that with maybe just a little bit of a warmer feeling. And that's what I needed at the time. And so, I think it really does kind of challenge our thinking in this space, and that, maybe we're not just hardwired where everything's a 0 and 1. That's, the time, space, and what's going on around us may actually have an influence on what type of engagement we're seeking and what we're seeking to get out of that, right?
No, I think that's such a good point, John. And it made me remember during the pandemic, there was a furniture company. I won't say the name, they're blue and yellow, but when you went online to try to contact them, there was a contact button right front and center. And I remember this because it was my own experience. And so I clicked contact us, and then scrolled down to get the phone number and they had a wait time. And I specifically remember the wait time was 642 hours or something just astronomical. And right away, I was like, okay, some developer got in there. And then I was thinking about it and I was like, oh my gosh, from an empathy perspective, they are probably slammed. They're probably so behind. They're trying to be as transparent as they can. But it kind of had me think of it in two ways. My first reaction was like, this is a joke. But then my next reaction was like, this is exactly what's happening right now in the world. And there's people on the other side of these phone calls. And maybe this time I can wait on my Billy bookcase and just send an email.
Right. I can see the mixed reaction to that. It's like 600, no way. What? But to have empathy, like you said, on people on the other side, that's talk about overwhelm. And you know, let's use this kind of as a segue into another topic I wanted to get your thoughts on in the remaining minutes we have is we're changing the way we interact. And there's a lot of the self-serve, there's a lot that we do in video, there's a lot we can do, you know, kind of distance. But with artificial reality and virtual reality, there's another, you know, wave of innovation coming. Where do you see the AR and VR fitting in this experience arena, if you will, right?
John, I want, John.
Go,
John.
Because I'm the one with the VR headset. That could be it. You know, I think it's an interesting space, and I think, you know, it's you know, is this a byproduct again of being forced into really one mode? And one mode only of real social interaction, where, you know, at least, you know, we can see faces and have conversations. This flat 2-dimensional screen. You know, I think that there's some you know, interesting, you know, almost back to G's point earlier too. When do you land the plane? You know, augmented reality, AR. You know, this is not new technology per se, but you know, that first entry into the market was ripe with a lot of challenge, and I think caused a lot of backlash. Socially, do we have the right laws in place? Where can you wear these? Where can you not? What can you do when you have these things on? So, you know, there was a lot to work through that maybe, you know, yep, we're out there in that 10%, but we've got to wait for a lot of other things to catch up before this becomes more relevant. Now, as we're seeing a lot of modernization around the field service space when it comes to the AR space. I think VR, you know, is still one of those, as we've been exploring it ourselves, is one of those that it's still early, but it's worth that 10% of the time. Why? Because we can see this. You know, I think anyone that's ever put on that headset would argue it's tricking the brain today. And it is creating a very new type of engagement that we haven't seen before. And I think it opens up ways to really reach and inspire and show art of the possible to our clients in ways that we've never been able to do before. You know, even real time in that conference room, right? There are definitely experiences we can create in that VR space that are entirely unique to that space. So, you know, I think it's one where this is a very good example where it's worth that 10%, that exploration. We can see, you know, we can see the art of the possible. However, there is still very much a catch up to do. Anyone that's, you know, that's put on those headsets, everything from just how do I deliver the technology? How do I onboard my clients to get into that virtual space? And then how do I captivate them while I've got them there? Is rather fascinating, but I think it is real time, you know, really a good example of this model in work and how we begin to explore adoption and use cases for our clients.
Yeah, I agree with John. I'm not looking forward to, you know, going across a crosswalk and realizing everyone's got a headset. I don't know if I might be the Scrooge in the group. You know, my kids might, you know, be into it. I know that when I put the VR headset, yeah, even though I convinced myself this is not real, I refused to walk the end of the plank that apparently was at the top of the 28-story building. I just could not bring myself to do it. So it has definitely reached a point of reality that does trick the brain, to John's point. I could see it as being a phenomenal training asset. Instead of having to do or conferencing and things of that nature. I think there's some natural evolutions there. I definitely put it in the 10% category. I don't think we know what the potential for VR really is. I think everyone just agrees that there's a future for it. No doubt about it. Now, I can only speculate how that's going to impact interactions, customer's experience, and so on and so forth, right?
Right.
You know, I can only speculate, but it's going to be an interesting evolution, but it's definitely in that 10%. I don't see it being something that's going to be, you know, as relevant or mainstream over the coming years.
I think the word we should focus on too is what Jon said. It is exploration. And let's be honest with our users and our people that we haven't figured it out. And we understand it's not going to be a replacement either. I think that's what happens sometimes with things like that, where it's like, by next year, every meeting will be in the metaverse. And people are like, wait, what? I don't want to go there. I'm going to be sick. So I think just like being really honest and upfront, like we're going to do our best to figure it out and make sure that whatever we put forth with it makes the most sense. But we need you to come along this journey with us. It can't be all or nothing. Like take a few steps. Come on, G, walk the plank just a little bit. I'll hold your hand. It'll be okay, but you don't have to do it every day.
There's a spider at the end, so that doesn't really work for me. So anyway.
I love that thought of, you know, one, it's kind of, you know, G, facing your fear. And I think with any innovation, there's some fear. There's fear of change. There's fear of how we experience it. And to be able to kind of take that fear and turn it into almost player whimsy, and maybe that wasn't where you were headed, but you know, I'll push the pendulum a little bit further and say a lot of times innovation is saying, why not? It's something different. It's an innovation we found in maybe another industry or another place. I mean, we get so many things from gaming in this technology world. How do you take that and say, well, let's try some things? And one of the things that I've heard about, you know, where that fits well is training, as it relates to how do you train someone with interactions. That's hard to teach in a classroom with book knowledge or with, you know, computer-based training or other thing, because you need to be able to interact.
But there's already things,
reality, virtual
there's already things that'll do it for you, Troy. I mean, in our case, you can already do call transcription, machine learning, and AI-based analytics, right? So everyone's working from home. You can't walk the hallway. People can't raise their hand and ask for help. There's already things that can be applied that are right on the cusp of that 70-20 line that you can apply today without necessarily having to think that you have to go the VR route or already start applying VR to be successful. And that's the practicality, reality discussion that we had and that we're having again today is at some point, be careful not to get caught up in things that are not yet ready. Yeah, keep an eye on it, but you know, you do need to operate your business today. Your customers are asking for services today, right? And if you're too far out into the future in your tech stack and innovation, you know, you may not have much of a company left if your customers are unhappy with your services in the moment.
Right. Now I can bring this thing full circle. You know, G, you just brought up a couple of use cases, but if you look at where the 70-20 model came from, right? It wasn't innovation. Innovation actually adopted it from education. And in fact, you know, and how we learn. And, you know, the reality says is, hey, you know, 70% of our learning comes from doing the hard things ourselves. And so, you know, what G is describing is just means of actually leveraging a little bit of AI, right? You know, that forced because of, you know, this virtual mode. No longer can I raise my hand and ask for my team lead and get help with the question that I've got, you know, with the call on the line, but I can leverage these more modern technologies to continue to allow me to do the hard things myself and allow me to progress faster and become more proficient faster. And so, you know, these two things actually dovetail together quite nicely when you think about it that way.
Yeah, I like that. We are at time, so let me just do one passing remark from each of you. Jon, you kind of had yours, you know, but be thinking. I'll circle back to you to see if you have one. Bree, do you have some closing thoughts?
I don't think so. I think if everyone can just always think about the users or your customers, think about them ahead of the technology and the daily struggles that they're going through or the different things that might come up when they're going to put in that request or they're going to call you. If you can just keep that empathy component there, I think that's the most important.
Yeah, I like that, empathy in design. Innovation with empathy. G.
Yeah, I mean, I'll echo a little bit what Bree said. I mean, it's how Steve Jobs, you know, garnered all his success with Apple, right? Is start with a customer and work your way back. Don't create a technology and then go searching for where it can be applied, right? So you're going to quickly find that if you put yourself in the shoes of the customer, we're customers, all of us every day, you know, you probably have some common pain points that you can quickly relate to, like, why is it so terrible when I have to reach an organization? And you'd be surprised how quickly you can address some of those immediate needs, and then start weaving in some of those 2010 type innovation, technologies progressively along the way, while still hitting some pretty significant ROI up front. So sometimes it's taking a step out of and not looking at technology as a solution. Find the problem first, and then figure out which technologies need to be enhanced, modernized, or perhaps even replaced. That might be a better approach.
Right. Back to you, Jon. Last call.
Oh gosh, I think we've said a lot here, but I think, I think thematically, what we keep coming back to is this is just, it's a big balancing of the teeter-totter, right? It's a balancing of our time, whether we're cooking out of a Julia Child's cookbook, and do we go with the butter heavy recipe or the vegetable heavy recipe today, right? But Julia just said, hey, it's balance and moderation throughout. And, whether we're thinking about, our end users, or we're thinking about, our users that are delivering the service, in Bree's case, right? And focusing on the experience on both sides of the house, because when we optimize for both, we optimize the whole, right? And, in G's case, how we manage, where we're spending our time, where we're putting our R&D efforts. I think it's about balance, it's about moderation, and kind of striking the sweet spot between those two. And maybe it was an obvious conclusion to come to, but it really is it's a fun topic to go explore and get into these very specific use cases around. So enjoy the time. Thanks for having us.
Awesome. Thank you. So let me close this out, and then I'll stop the stream. Thank you for joining another Workflow Wednesday. I'm so excited. I get to bring in some of my peers, and as I hope you see in my content and the things I share on LinkedIn, on YouTube, that now with Troy talks about what's happening right now in the business world and what's happening on ServiceNow. And at Thirdera, we get to focus on you, the business user, and the business organizations that are trying to figure out what's in my 70, 20, and 10% where you should be innovating. And so let us help you. If there's any way we can reach out, I'm glad to be your glue. Reach out. I'll help you get connected with the right people. And again, I look forward to connecting you next time on Now with Troy and Workflow Wednesday. Thanks.
Awesome.